You know, for 17 straight years, humanity was locked in a war with a mountain. And this is the story of how we won. We're talking about one of the greatest engineering feats ever, the Gotthard Base Tunnel, a project so wild, so audacious, that most people said it just couldn't be done.
So to really get what this is all about, you have to ask the right question. And it's not, how do you climb it? Or how do you fly over it? No, the question is, how do you defeat a mountain? Because for centuries, the Alps weren't some beautiful postcard picture. They were an enemy.
The problem was, well, it was simple and yet absolutely epic in scale. You had this massive wall of rock right in the heart of Europe, basically choking the continent's economic lifeblood and splitting north from south.
I mean, for generations, everyone had to rely on these ancient, zigzagging roads that were always under threat from snow and avalanches. Yeah, they built railways, but the trains were just straining to get up these incredibly steep hills, making everything slow and expensive. And as trade boomed, you had thousands upon thousands of trucks just clogging up these old routes, creating total gridlock and terrible pollution. The whole system was about to collapse.
So this wasn't about making things a little more convenient. This was about economic survival. The stakes got so high that engineers were basically forced to look at a plan that, honestly, most people thought was pure science fiction.
And the plan? No, it was as simple as it was completely insane. Don't go over the mountain, go through it. Drill straight through the heart of the Alps and create a flat, high-speed artery for trade deep underneath all that rock.
The scale of this idea is just staggering to think about. The tunnel was going to be 57 kilometers long. That makes it the longest railway tunnel in the entire world. It's kind of like driving from one side of a major city to the other, but you're doing it entirely through solid rock.
And it wasn't just going to be long, it was going to be deep. I mean, really deep. At its lowest point, the tunnel is 2,500 meters beneath the peaks. That's like having the weight of 3 Burj Khalifas stacked on top of you, just pressing down. And that is why some of the world's top engineers just wrote it off as impossible. They argued that at that depth, the forces of nature were just too strong, too powerful to overcome. The mountain, they said, would always win.
But they started anyway, and they framed the whole project not just as a construction job, but as a series of battles. Distinct battles against the raw power of the planet, waged deep, deep underground.
The first enemy was the mountain itself, just the immense, crushing weight of it. This kind of pressure could squeeze solid steel like it was paper and cause these unpredictable, catastrophic rock collapses without a single moment's warning. In fact, some of the early test tunnels were literally just squeezed shut by the force.
So to fight back, they came up with this brilliant 3-step defense. First, right after they excavated a new section, they'd spray it with a special concrete mixture that set almost instantly. Then they'd install these massive precast concrete slabs. And finally, in the really weak, dangerous zones, they'd put in these huge steel rings, basically creating an artificial skeleton to hold the mountain back.
Okay, so they're figuring out how to handle the pressure. But just as they do, a new and totally life-threatening challenge appears: the heat. You go 2.5 kilometers deep, and the Earth's core turns that solid rock into a sweltering oven.
Get this, inside the mountain, temperatures were regularly hitting 50 degrees Celsius. That's 122 degrees Fahrenheit. In that kind of heat, a person can only survive for a few minutes. Without a solution, that tunnel was going to be a tomb for anyone who went inside.
So what did they do? They engineered a whole new environment. They laid this massive network of pipes that constantly circulated cold water all the way from the surface. And this was the revolutionary part. They didn't just cool the air, they cooled the mountain itself before workers could even go into a new section. It was the first construction site of its kind on Earth. All right, so they've got the pressure and the heat managed. That's when they ran into their most terrifying foe yet: water. And we're not talking about a gentle stream. This was water that had been trapped inside rock fissures for centuries, pressurized by the unimaginable weight of the mountain above.
The pressure was an incredible 2,900 psi. To put that in perspective, that's like having the entire weight of a car resting on your thumb. When they accidentally breached a pocket of this water, it would explode through solid rock like a cannonball. It could flood the entire tunnel in an instant. The solution they came up with here was just pure genius. Instead of trying to pump all that water out, they decided to turn the mountain's greatest weapon against itself. They'd drill smaller pipes into the waterlogged rock, and for weeks, they'd pump a freezing liquid through them, slowly turning that high-pressure water into a solid block of ice. Then, the giant boring machine could just cut through the frozen section like it was any other piece of rock. It's absolutely incredible. So, with all the physical dangers finally under control, there was one last mind-bending challenge left: precision. Remember, they had two teams digging from opposite ends of the mountain range. After years and years of work, they had to meet perfectly in the middle.
Think about it. A tiny error, just 1 degree off at the start, would mean they'd be kilometers apart by the time they got to the middle. To pull this off, they used an entire suite of advanced tech. Satellite GPS gave them the exact starting points, laser guidance systems kept the huge boring machines on a perfectly straight line, advanced gyroscopes made sure they were always level. They even had to factor the curvature of the Earth into their calculations.
And so, on October 15, 2010, the whole world was watching. After 17 years and 57 kilometers of digging through solid rock, that final wall crumbled. When they checked the alignment, the difference between the two tunnels was just half an inch. It was the engineering equivalent of hitting a bullseye from 30 miles away. Just unbelievable.
The tunnel was complete. A brand new artery for Europe was born. But there was one last unseen danger that the engineers had actually anticipated years and years in advance.
The problem was air. Just air itself. See, a high-speed train entering a 57-kilometer-long sealed tube basically acts like a piston in a syringe. It creates this massive shockwave of compressed air in front of it, a wave so powerful it could literally shatter the train's windows. The solution? They built two separate, parallel tunnels and connected them with cross passages and ventilation shafts. This way the pressure has somewhere to go and it just dissipates safely. It was a problem solved before it ever even happened. This incredible triumph of engineering, though, it came at a profound human cost. Over those 17 years of construction, 9 workers tragically lost their lives deep inside the mountain they were trying to conquer.
Today, a memorial stands at the tunnel's entrance to honor their sacrifice. And it's just this powerful reminder that these amazing structures aren't just built with concrete and steel. They're built with human courage, and sometimes with life itself.
The Gotthard Base Tunnel is proof that with enough ingenuity and perseverance, even the challenges we label impossible can be overcome. It really makes you wonder, what's the next great barrier, physical or otherwise, that humanity should set its sights on conquering?